as she reached back over the blanket to refill her spoon. "And how close are you and Edward, dear?" she asked softly with a gentle expression. I furrowed my brows, wondering how best to answer that particular question. "Well," I tilted my head a bit, trying to find a good way to be vague. "We talk a lot, I guess." I shrugged. "We've only really gone out once," I said in reference to our first and only date. "Port Angeles," I added one as me glanced at me quizzically. She nodded thoughtfully before turning to me with a worried expression. "What's he like when he's around you?" she asked carefully. I lifted my chin up and looked me in the eye. "He's very sweet and protective, and always makes me feel comfortable," I rasped honestly. Not many people ever saw that side of Edward, and I knew they'd all get the wrong impression if I didn't set them straight. She smiled at me sweetly. "Yes, I think we all got that impression earlier," she chuckled, shaking her head, then stopping, and looking at me with a grimace. "But I'm not entirely partial to his filthy mouth," she said disapprovingly. I had to hold back a snicker, while I shoved the spoon in my mouth, nodding with a faux disapproving look. "The hair," Alice gasped loudly, clamping her palm over her mouth, and looking at me with wide eyes. I could feel my face heating up as I nodded minutely at her suggestion. I was caught trying to look nice for Edward. That was so ridiculously embarrassing. I was wishing that the blanket toe pane could double as a hole for me to crawl into. When she removed her hand from her mouth, she smirked at me deviously. "Did he like it?" she asked in a loud whisper. I was a little taken aback by her curiosity. I figured that she wouldn't want me doing anything that Edward liked. But he did like the hair, so I nodded cautiously. Her smile grew wider as her expression grew impossibly more devious. "I bet he would just love all the new clothes you got for Christmas," she smirked in a suggestive tone. My jaw dropped. Literally, spoon and all. She was utterly fine with pimping me out to her arch-nemesis so long as I wore her crappy girly clothes. As me chuckled softly at the exchange as I gave Alice's devious smirk. I closed my mouth with an audible snap, preparing to make the ultimate sacrifice for any kind of semi-normal relationship that involved both Edward and Alice. Maybe he would like them occasionally, I croaked carefully, looking for some sign of a truce. Alice pursed her lips thoughtfully at my offer. "How occasionally?" she asked, delicately arcing her eyebrow at me. I huffed at her and put my spoon down, happy for the extra burst of energy the chocolate gave me, but preparing for a rather lengthy negotiation. As me chuckled again, and stood up from the blanket as Alice scooted forward closer to me. "Not at school," I said firmly. Too many people at school for my comfort to see me in some of things she liked. She frowned at me with furrowed brows, and a near pout. Although she already knew I was defenseless to her pout, where clothes were concerned. "That only leaves weekends," she pouted. I rolled my eyes at the pout, showing her that it wasn't working this time. She huffed, and crossed her arms over her chest. "Fine. Weekends only," she grudgingly accepted. I smiled at her, surprised that I had won out so easily, and resolving to lock myself inside every weekend. "But," she added with a squeak, making my smile fall, "nothing is out of question." I shook my head vehemently. "No way, Alice. No skirts, no heels. And I get one veto a weekend." I negotiated firmly, needing for this to work, but knowing there was no way I could be anywhere near comfortable in anything like that, even around Edward. She snickered at me. "Okay, no short skirts or dresses, no heels. One veto only," she clarified with an arched eyebrow. I bit my lip thoughtfully at her final offer. She stared at me for a long while with bated breath as I mulled the whole deal over in my head. Eventually, I nodded at her with a martyred sigh. And the squealing as she jumped up and down on the blanket excitedly made me cover my ears and cringe away. I was happy to see her happy, but I was dreading the whole truce. I began dinner shortly afterwards while Alice assembled my new weekend wardrobe, happy for the distraction to keep me awake. I made the Alfredo for Edward. I mean, he did confess his love for me. The least I could do was make my boyfriend his favorite dinner. I smiled sleepily into the pot of pasta as it boiled. Throughout dinner, Esme kept shooting me sympathetic glances as Alice prattled on endlessly about accessories and the best colors for my skin tone. I think I was a winter, or some stupid crap. And I think the only reason Esme let her go on about it was just so that things wouldn't be so tense. And as she washed dishes with me afterwards, I found out why. Esme picked up a plate, drying it while I washed.
Dr. Cullen and I had a discussion today,
she said quietly, placing a plate inside the cabinet and taking another. She wasn't meeting my gaze as she said it, making me a little nervous as to what this conversation was about.
About alternative therapies,
she whispered. I shook my head at the dishwater, grabbing the countertop in frustration. No, I rasped firmly, closing my eyes. It wasn't a discussion I ever wanted her talking about. I'm very sorry for the incident today, Esme, but I trailed off, turning my head to her with a pleading expression. I don't want it, I added quietly. She sighed deeply beside me and leaned her back against the counter.
I know I've always respected your decision about that,
she said softly, looking at me apologetically.
But I have to try.
I shook my head and kept washing dishes, making it clear that all of her efforts were fruitless. Esme was under the impression that I'd just be going to some cushy office once a week to talk about my feelings. But I knew better what happened at those places. They all wanted to trigger me, and then after they did, they all wanted to commit me, and then they all wanted to drug me up to placate me, until I was nothing more than a walking complacent vegetable. The life I was leading now was far more normal and comfortable than that. By the time I began making my coconut confections, I was so tired that I could hardly keep my eyes open. My muscles were sore and stiff, and I just couldn't wait to get to Edward's so I could start popping those pretty blue pain pills. I lined up all the bags of cookies. I had added Dr. Cullen in the mix tonight, a silent thanks for the help after gym. And also to give Esme a reason to go over every day. And then there were 7. At 10, I took extra precaution with my bedroom door, locking it before I closed it, and making sure I had the key in my newly cleaned hoodie pocket. I didn't usually resort to those measures, but I was worried about someone checking in on me during the night. I was hoping the locked door would be enough to send them away if they did. I left out the door promptly, cringing into my hoodie at the cold breeze as I stalked my way drowsily across the yard with my bag on my back. When I reached the lattice, I looked up at the Edward slip window longingly, granting me the energy needed to climb my way up and swing my legs over the railing. He had the door open before I could even knock. His shining green eyes met mine with a smile as he ushered me in from the cold, hastily reaching up to remove my hood. I turned around to face him with a big smile, nearly bouncing despite my exhaustion, really looking forward to a real kiss. And he didn't disappoint, stepping close to me and taking my face gently in his hands and gingerly touching his lips to mine with a sigh. I figured he was afraid to deepen it and hurt my nose. As if I would really care when he was kissing me. So I tangled my fingers in his messy hair and pressed him closer, darting my tongue out across